Aaron, you can take off the web sharing. You can take off this. Okay, good. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. And to you, Robbie, thank you for giving your time. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Rob. Honored to be here.
Now, as you know, Jewish law covers every aspect of life, from the moment one is born till the moment one passes away. From the first thing in the morning until you go to bed at night, every second of the day, there's another law. But there's one section in Jewish law that teaches you how to become a mensch. And that's important to know, because a person must never say, well, that's me. At any age, you can change. And that book is called Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers. It was written about 1800 years ago by the same authors who wrote the Mishna. And it's quite fascinating. So what I would like to do this evening is I want to learn through quickly the first Mishna. And then, Robbie, I'm going to ask you to comment on it. Is that okay?
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, so it goes as follows. Moshe Kibbel Torah Sinai, that Moses received the Torah from Sinai. Hear those words? Moses received the Torah from Sinai, and he passed it on to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets. The prophets passed it on to the men of the Great Assembly, and they, the men of the Great Assembly, said three things: be patient in judgment, raise up many students, and make a fence around the Torah. Now, commentary discussing the Mishnah says as follows. Hold on. Number one, this is not a history book. So what's it telling me the history? That Moses received the Torah from Sinai and passed it on to Joshua, Joshua to the elders. It's not a history book. That's number one. And we know all of that before. Number two, Moses did not receive the Torah from Sinai. He received the Torah at Sinai from God. And number three, what's the practical applications of this Mishnah to help me better my life? Because after all, that is what this book is about. And commentary says, in fact, this Mishnah is a 5-step program of how to transform your life. The first thing one needs is to have a dream. Okay. And then why does it say Moses received the Torah from Sinai? Why did God give the Jewish people the Torah at Sinai? Because Sinai was the smallest of all the mountains. He didn't choose Everest. He didn't choose Kilimanjaro. He didn't choose the tallest mountain in the Sinai Peninsula. He chose Sinai because it's the smallest of all the mountains, showing humility. And that says that the commentary is what the Mishnah is teaching, that Moses received the Torah because of his humility. That's the first step you need. He gives it to Joshua. What do you learn from Joshua? You learn perseverance. Joshua was the person who persevered. He stuck by it day and night. He gave it to the men of the Great Assembly. He gave it to the elders. The elders are the wise people, not old people, wise people who could always see the bigger picture. The elders gave it to the prophets. The prophets are people able to see the unintended consequence, the future. And eventually they gave it to the men of the Great Assembly. They were the people who came back after the destruction of the first temple, when Darius allowed the Jewish people to go back to Israel about 2,400 years ago to rebuild the second temple. Everything was a mess, and they rebuilt. They made a difference. And that's his commentary is the fifth thing. You have to make a difference in life. So that's what I would like to focus on, is these 5 steps. So the first thing is Moses received the Torah because of his humility. Before that, well, you have to have a dream. So I want to ask you, when you in life, let's just speak Nando's for a second. When you started Nando's, did you have a clear dream and vision? Did you see 1,200 stores in 30 countries?
Rob, no. I mean, we had a clear vision of wanting to take, what we believed was the best chicken in the world global. But we never dreamed we would ever, we didn't have the clear vision like that we'd imagine. I mean, I think we went by step. We failed so many times in that time. So we never had a vision. We had a big dream to do something, but it wasn't step by step, if you know what I mean. It was really, I didn't realize how hard it would be, to be absolutely honest. We sat down one day and we thought, we've got the greatest chicken in the world. We've got to take it global. What does that mean? And that journey was a proper journey. And we've walked a sand road many times on that journey, which is, part of being, the humility of it. I mean, we were humbled. We've been humbled, and we're in the hospitality business, and that business humbles you. Particularly having a kosher Nando's, that humbles you, Rolf. And that's part of. But you've got to have a dream, you've got to have a vision. But I think one of the things as well, which I think is so powerful, and I must say this up front, Rolf, that I've been privileged to learn Pirkei Avos by one of the best teachers in the world, and that's you. And And I think for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been learning it with Ellen and with Gary. But I'm slow to learn and quick to forget. So you're going to have to really be gentle with me tonight. So, we go in a step-by-step process. I think you've taught that step-by-step to us so many times, but it really is a powerful, manual for life and written 1800 years ago. And I mean, it's so relevant for today. It's actually frightening. I remember asking you the question, I thought it was written like 100 years ago, but it hasn't been. I mean, it's just crazy that things are still so relevant today. And I think, the lessons that you can take from it in learning is fantastic. So we've learned from taking into practical steps from a Nando's, you need a purpose as well as vision and a plan. You need strong purpose. And I think that's what we get from Moshe as well, is a sense of purpose. And from the Jewish people, a strong sense of purpose.
Does Nando's have a clear mission statement that's written and a vision document?
Very clear. I mean, our statement is to change people's lives. And it's a very, very clear, we have a very clear vision and a very clear document. And, we know, but it took us 20 years to really, not to do it, because we've been doing it we've been going for 33 years. So we've been doing it for 33 years, but we articulated that vision about 10 years ago. A very clear vision of, our kind of vision is to have fun and make money, change the way the world thinks about chicken, and change people's lives one chicken at a time. And that bit about having fun and making money, it's not making money and having fun. In other words, don't chase money. And we see that in Pirkei Avos very clearly, that you shouldn't chase money. But if you chase a vision or you chase a purpose, and having fun was really the vision or the purpose. So have fun, because if you can, in your work that you do, if you've got passion, if you enjoy what you're doing, and then the money follows, that's a very clear vision. It's not, our vision was never to mass as much money as we could and then have fun. I mean, I think in life we've seen, a lot of rich people that are very, very miserable because money doesn't always bring happiness. And we see that a lot of times. I've known some people, in our community that are extremely wealthy, extremely miserable. And actually, do you want to be around them? And I've had the privilege of working in malaria elimination in Mozambique, seeing the poorest of the poor and being as happy as anything. And actually learning more from those people than from the rich people. So, the having fun and making money part was very deliberate. And changing the way the world thinks about chicken was really also very deliberate. But then changing people's lives, one chicken at a time, talks about the humility of that journey. It talks about that it's one chicken at a time. It's not just going to happen. It's going to take a long time. It's that sand road that I spoke about earlier. It is about a long journey. Don't expect things to happen overnight. It's not, with technology, things happen overnight. But I think, one has to learn that really greatness takes time. And that we see again from this Mishna in particular.
So just go back, your vision. What are the points of your vision?
To have fun and make money, change the way the world thinks about chicken, and change people's lives one chicken at a time.
Beautiful. So I want to go back to the first step of the Mishnah, humility. What's your definition of humility?
Sure. I mean, I think it's really, for me, it's been about treating people the way that you want to be treated. I mean, it's the kind of core of Judaism for me, that it's about never believing in some of your own PR or some of the stories that you had. It's about really understanding that, one day you got the carrot in your hand, the next day it can be in your tochas. You've got to be so careful, that it really is about, if people start saying how well you've done, how great you've done, and you actually start believing that, I think it's the saddest day. And to me, humility I learned from my late dad was really, if you can mix with the common crowd and at the same time mix with kings, and not differentiate between the two. That's the humility of it, because you can learn from everybody. And so to me, that's in essence what humility is. It's about, we learned it from Moshe. And I think the beauty of Moshe getting it again is that it shows that everybody, Moshe makes it accessible. Every man can actually learn from the Torah. Everyone can actually get things from the Torah. And you don't necessarily, the kind of goodness of the words that we're going to be learning, it's in everyone's control to make a difference on that.
How do you have to have a certain ego to open up 1,200 stores in 30 countries. How do you balance Seriously, how do you balance ego and humility?
Well, I think everyone's got a sense of ego. Okay, I mean, it's not to say, you know, you've got to be able to manage that ego, and for me, it's about a team effort. I mean, if I thought for 1 minute that Nando's was as a result of me, you know, and I'm the only one that did Nando's, you know, I stepped down from running Nando's 10 years ago. I got to a point where we had about 1,000 restaurants, and I just lost control. I was very unhappy. I lost my mojo, and I just didn't feel like doing it anymore. And if I for 1 second thought that the success of Nando's was down to an individual, that taught me that it wasn't. And you know, I stepped down, and thank God, when I look back today, thank God I did that, because it enabled me to get much more involved in the purpose of Nando's, concentrating very much on that changing lives bit, which has rewarded me more than anything. I can't even tell you, I've never been more fulfilled. I've never had more fun. I've never felt I've made more impact into our business than I am right now, by not concentrating on the business, but by concentrating on some of the social impact that our business has, and looking at ways of how we can integrate that into the DNA of our business, not for the sake of a checklist or tick box, or even for, you know, social, for where you say, well, we're doing this from a CSI point of view. We try not to do projects for a CSI point of view. Most of our programs that we do, nobody even knows what we're doing. Today, we were honored on our Goodbye Malaria program. Our CEO, Sherwin, was honored by the minister, Zwelium Keys, for the work that we've done together with an incredible panel. And nobody even knows that Nando's is involved in that, or that we were involved in inspiring that program with a certain kind of way of doing things. Because to me, the kind of real joy is by giving with an open hand. If you give with an open hand without an expectation, I mean, you really can't expect anything back. I think if you're going to give and think, well, I'm going to give in because I'm getting back, you're always disappointed. And I think that giving with an open heart and an open hand is a really, really incredible thing that I've learned. And it almost makes me feel a bit guilty, to be absolutely honest. I mean, we've done work in places like Mozambique and in South Africa, where no one will ever eat a Nando's. No one will ever have a quarter chicken and chips, extra hot with a side of chips. But knowing that they'll never know that we actually helped them, and the impact that we've made is bigger joy. I actually get guilty sometimes for the joy that I'm getting in actually doing the work. It's a crazy feeling, and it's something that I wish, you know, a lot more people would actually experience, because a lot of times you do things, but there's that expectation that you're doing it for something back. But it's the joy of giving without expecting is magnificent, particularly to the most vulnerable in society, and sometimes the overlooked. You know, malaria is one of those kind of diseases that really is, you know, in the COVID pandemic, if we didn't concentrate and really focus on doing the work and the kind of work, the team that impacted for us were just phenomenal. I mean, they pivoted like you cannot believe, with passion. And it's that kind of, you know, sensitivity, humbleness, resilience.
Let me come back to that. Your father, he was a bit ahead of his time. I remember when it wasn't fashionable to run Comrades, he was running Comrades a few times. He had his own plane. Was he a humble guy?
Incredible, Rolf. I mean, I think, you know, I always say I'm a dwarf on the shoulder of a giant. You know, that really is who I am personally. You know, he taught me so much, and we worked closely together for 32 years. We worked very closely together, and he was the most humble man. He was a guy that faced every challenge. You know, we were so different in our kind of outlook, but he would treat everybody equally. It was unbelievable. You know, the kind of outpouring of sorrow when he passed from, you know, incredible amount of people was incredible. And that's what we learned from him. You know, that kind of lesson, that you treat everybody equally. You know, don't pander to politicians, or don't pander to the kings, you know, because, you know, they're transient, they pass. And yet the guy, you know, and that's what I love about South Africa, actually, because we do live in a remarkable country. And we often overlook that, because, you know, the middle ground of South Africa will hold. I've absolutely no doubt. The average South African is an incredible, incredible human being. There's a humility and a resilience and a really good soul in the average South African. And we tend to sometimes through media get twisted and believe in something different. And my dad taught us that. He taught us that. He taught us the value of money. He taught us the value that money is transient. That taught us the power of family, the relationships. He was a strong relationship guy. So really, I'm so thankful for everything we learned, and we live in his shadow, and with the view to maintain that legacy. In a way, we're humbled by it.
I mean, every time I came to your office, which was in their house, your parents' house, both your dad and your mom, your father would always invite me to the inner chamber over there to have a little l'chaim. You felt like an absolute king. Always had time. Did he ever work? I mean, he always seemed to me to have a tremendous amount of time.
He always had time. It was incredible. He had time, and he said proper l'chaim. He said he knew how to say a proper l'chaim. And, those were came from Middelburg. And I think our old values of Middelburg with hospitality, that you treat people with strong hospitality is critical. And we learned from that. It's been beautiful. It's been a privilege.
Your definition of humility, which you picked up from your parents, but is treating other people the way you would like to be treated. Yeah, that's the way you define it.
That's what I define it. And I mean, there's probably a lot of other definitions, but I think that the minute you stop treating people the way that you would want to be treated, or stop treating people, you treat people in a haughty way, or you treat people in an arrogant way, or whatever. And it's not always easy. It's sometimes, you get a lesson, you get a smack, and it's good. Lucky I've got a strong family that, keeps us all grounded.
So humility is the first step. We've heard your definition. Now Moses gives it to Joshua, and what we learn from Joshua is resilience. Resilience means that if you take upon yourself to do something, comes good times, come hard times, come difficult times, you stick it out. Did you ever have those? Genuine, did you ever have really tough times in Nando's that you want to throw in the towel?
Rov, I would say there are probably 3 times that I've said it's enough. In the first 20 years, definitely 3
Share them
times.
with us.
The first time was really when, I never forget, we won some massive awards for marketing and some accolades, and we were having a party. So we were in those early days without social media. You could have a bit of fun, say l'chaim, and you could do, it was Lebedik. It was properly Lebedik. And we were having a proper party. And I remember our finance director came to me and said we couldn't pay salaries at the end of the week. And from a high to a low, that you just realize how difficult it was. So from being this kind of, from being high to get that tenseness of and again, it talks to the fact that everybody thought, certainly in the early days, that Nando's was bigger than it was, and that it was stronger than it was. And, so from a public point of view, the last thing you ever wanted to do was to show a little bit of weakness, or show a little bit of kind of that there was vulnerability. And so, I was ready to. I'll never forget that night. I got home and ready to throw in the towel. And that's when you realize, when you're not on this journey alone, and when you've got people around you that can help you and lift you up, and be there for you when you're down. It's an incredible kind of thing to have. And I think we've learned that in the pandemic now, that's been exacerbated. I mean, I think that the kind of lessons that we learned from the pandemic is about relationships, which again, taking from my father and learning about deep relationships and resilience of those relationships, that you learn in those relationships from the downs, not so much from the ups. That you tend to learn from the bad times more than the good times. And I can say that if I never had a strong wife, if I never had a strong brother, and strong sisters who are listening from California, Rob, your reach goes to California. My lovely sisters are listening. And if you haven't got that kind of family structure around you that can prop you up, and good mates where you can reach out, you need a minion. You need 10 mates that you can talk to and share your inner thoughts to, and that are batting for you as opposed to batting against you. It's a very important thing to have. And I think the critical part of that is not putting money first. Because the minute money gets involved in a lot of those kind of issues, that tends to muddy the waters quite a bit. So, resilience to me, I think that being born in South Africa, staying in South Africa is a sense of resilience. It's not easy right now to stay the journey, and yet now is the time. Now is when you actually have to. And running comrades is one of those kind of lessons that teaches you resilience and teaches you staying power. And it's very easy to chop and change. But when you look back in your life and you say, well, you've had 35 years of, I've had 33 years now, basically, of Nando's. I mean, we chicken and chips for 33 years. We haven't gone into pizzas, and we've tried a few things on the side, but generally speaking, it's been a really focused journey, and gone deep in that journey where you look at how you impact people is critical. And so to me, resilience is probably one of the strongest kind of characteristics that you need, because when the times are tough, it's easy to change, and it's easy to move out of your lane, and to try something different. And yet you've got to stay the course. You've got to stay the course. And Maya Khan taught me that big time as well. That, it takes 15 years. Maya told me when we were going about 4 years into our journey, Maya said it takes 15 years to create a brand. And I thought, he's not, what does Maya know? Okay. And I swear it was like almost 15 years to the day that Nando's became an overnight success, if I could put it that way. And for a lot of people think, well, it just popped up. It didn't. It popped up, as they say in Afrikaans, ons het 'n grondpad geloop. It's been a sand road. It hasn't been always glitz and glamour. And I've always taken it as a sign of our success is when you get to a country that we're operating in. And if the passport officer, if the guy that stamps your passport knows Nando's and has a smile on his face when you tell him, when he asks you where you're from and you say Nando's and he stamps your passport with a smile, then I know we've cracked it. And, for many, many, many years I traveled and the passport guys didn't know us at all. And now, thank God, there's a smile. So,
but you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, that the key for resilience is to be focused on few things.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's important, to try and have that focus. I mean, I'm the worst one, so don't do as I do, do as I say, because I think I'm probably involved in too many things. But when you've got business partners or operators that are concentrating on certain businesses or certain programs or whatever, and they really are focused, it's incredible what you can achieve in that journey. It's very difficult to be a generalist, I think. I think today it's about, for me, and I'm really talking, I mean, from a Nando's perspective and from my own personal experience, and some of the things, I'm not here as a maven or not here as any kind of, consultant that's done much. I'm saying that what we've learned is that the minute we've actually stepped out of some of our lanes or stepped out of what we thought we knew, and tried things that were starting to become too generalist, we've got a proper smack. And then you go back to what your core is. And I mean, I think, again, that the pandemic has taught us that. And again, in Pirkei Avos, when you read some of the other chapters, it's incredible, some of the wisdom that has crept in, just almost teaching you that. So, the wisdom in the learnings is so relevant.
Acquire a good friend, one of them.
Acquire a good friend, you know what I mean? Build fences, it's incredible. The more assets, the more worries. One tends to have kind of like a, I think, kind of, again, I keep referring back to the pandemic, but for me, the core lesson in the pandemic was a couple of things. But number one was trust in Hashem, because at the end of the day, you might think you run the world, but Hashem actually is running the world, which I thought was a very, very important lesson to everybody. That in 1 second you can be taken out. And another big lesson we learned was the value of relationships, and the value that, if you came into the pandemic with bad relationships, and those relationships were based on power or based on, befriending because people in power were able to help you or whatever, you learned very quickly that was a very thin kind of infrastructure. So, it's a very, very important thing to have. For me, going into the pandemic with my family unit, with my kids, who have been incredibly strong and incredibly sustaining for me, to see them grow and to see their values and to see the way they behaved in the pandemic was phenomenal. And I think that those are the kind of things that when you step back and you think, well, did you need another house? Did you need 3 Ferraris or a Ferrari? Or was a Ferrari useful? Certainly in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, when there was such uncertainty, you thought, what were the assets really worth? Your assets were your kind of jewels that you had around you and your family, and the relationships that you had. For me, and I think that was a kind of big moment for me, like a wake up. And in essence, we'd been living our life that way, from a Nando's point of view. We've never really looked at conquering the world. We've always tried to do things in a thoughtful way, in a systematic way. I mean, certainly early on in the development, I didn't quite understand some of the value drivers in our business and didn't quite get the business model right. And it took me like 20 years to learn where value is really created in a business. So, we're slow to learn. As I said to you, it took 20 years. Probably will take other people 10, but for us, it was, we learned in the pandemic that, thank God, we had one brand, we had like one system, we had one business. We didn't have to worry about too much. And if we were spread out into 100 factories and in all kinds of things, would have been a very different kind of environment for us. It's
go back to the resilience.
It's almost basics, and that's what, to me, what comes out in Pirkei Avos.
Just to go back, if you would share. So that was one of your lows where you wanted to throw in the towel when you had that, you couldn't pay salaries. What were the others? The other two, if you want to share them.
Robert, so, it's all around the same kind of things where you're just tired, where you're just at a point where, I remember when just before I stepped down, I sat down with my partner and I just looked at myself one day and I just thought, I'm just not happy. I'd lost my little spring in the step and it was very complicated. I mean, the business was growing and we weren't really converting the profitability that we should be converting. And I just felt I was letting myself down and then letting the group down. And it was like time to step aside. And the power of having good partners, where I sat with my partner, Robbie Enthoven, and I said to him, I said, Robbie, this is not going well. And he asked me a very, very profound question. He said, is Nando's a dynastical business? Is it a business where you want your family to run it and own it? Or is it a business that can be family owned, but professionally managed and run? And they would honor whatever I wanted to do. And they had a very different outlook on those two kind of approaches. And I said to him, look, I don't want to force my family to do to run business. I think it's one of the saddest things when you force your kids to fit into a mold of a business or to do what they have to do. And thank God I've got fiercely independent kids that each in their own right have been incredibly successful and have done incredible things. And I didn't want them to come and have to be in the business. I think it was unfair on the people in the Nando's business, the Nandokas, to all of a sudden have a family member that doesn't really want to be there. And so I said to Robbie, I want this to be family owned, but professionally managed. And that's when you got great partners that share your values, because we always built our business on values. So to me, the Nando's business was my kids always laugh at me when I say that the cornerstone of our business was our values that we developed. And I'm using cornerstone for their enjoyment tonight, Rob. They're all going to laugh when I'm saying that word, because I always say that businesses are built on and it's built on values. Pride, passion, courage, integrity, family are the kind of Nando's values that we
say that again. Pride, passion,
courage, integrity, and family are the 5 values that we did 33 years ago. We sat down and wrote those values on a card, and we haven't wavered from those values over the 33 years. It's not like through the pandemic. I said to the Nando's team the other day, Nando's was built for this pandemic. Because we're a single brand, we've got a single kind of, we've got various channels, but we've got a single kind of approach. But in essence, our values and our purpose were written 33 years ago for this moment. You know what I mean? It was quite profound in that, purpose is such an important part, and the pursuit of purpose, that if you can find your purpose in life very early on, you don't need much else, because you tend to generate energy and optimism and the kind of good things that go on, and it's very, very powerful. And so we had those from day one. Now, it's not to say again that there are times that you're not getting tired. And I mean, when I sat with Robbie that time, I was really tired. And again, having the partners that can lift you up when you're tired as opposed to putting their boot in your throat. And often, that's what relationships are. It's about a win-lose kind of situation. And Robbie's view was, Robbie's view was that we need you in this business. You're the soul of this business. We need you, and we need you to be inspired, and we need you to add that kind of dimension of purpose. And the important part is you learn in life that you have to keep changing, and you have to keep, you got to keep reinventing yourself. It's not a question of just, what you can't sit back and say, well, what I did yesterday, I can do tomorrow. The world is changing at such a speed. You have to bring youth through. You have to listen and learn and give them an opportunity to what I'm finding, certainly what we found in the last 5 years, is the youth today are much more mature than the youth than I remember as a young guy. I mean, we were much less responsible. I think the youth today are much more conscious. They're much more concerned about the world. They're much more caring about sustainability. They're much more responsible than we were. They're much more caring, and one has to give them more ownership and responsibility. And I learn from my kids every day. I can tell you right now.
Can you tell me recently about 2 young advertising executives that pitched to you?
Yeah. I mean, what I find is that South Africa is a remarkable country. I get crime and all the other stuff that goes with it, and politics is just disgusting. And I mean, crime is just, I don't want to talk about it. And it's just one of those things where I can change my mind in a sec. We've all been hijacked. We've all had our incidents, and it's it can happen anywhere in the world, but it tends to happen a bit much here. But if you just can park that for the moment and really look at the country that we've got, and understand what a resilient country we've got, what we've gone through as a country, the fact that we have a constitutional democracy. Our constitution is one of the best constitutions in the world, which most people don't even know we have a constitution. Very few people have ever even read the preamble to a constitution. I mean, I'd love to challenge everybody here to Google the preamble to the South African Constitution and read that. I said it on a discussion with the chief rabbi earlier in the pandemic last year, that for me, the kind of, it was a mezuzah. The preamble is my comfort to know, it's my mezuzah for the country, that we, apart from the Rebbe's brocha, because I think the Rebbe gave this country a brocha, and I think that to me is the overarching comfort I have in staying in South Africa, is the Rebbe's brocha. And I think, you can maybe articulate on that a little bit, because I think it's an important moment. But I think that for me, having a preamble, or having the constitution that is so far ahead in the world of human rights and of social, of dignity and humility, there's so many elements that almost are pirkei avos written into the. It's been an interesting one to actually take the preamble and see how that relates into pirkei, because it very much talks to the Nando's values. The Nando's kind of values and the preamble values are very, very similar. There's very little sunlight between us.
In the slow journey that we're on in the country, which we all have confidence in, do you see the values coming through?
I do see the values coming through, not through the politicians, okay, but through the people of South Africa. And it's quite incredible when you can ignore some of the political stuff. And I think, we speak a little bit about the bigger picture, of seeing the bigger picture, because you have
I want you to elaborate on that.
No, you sometimes get caught up in the minutiae, and you get caught up in watching the news and in the day-to-day Zondo and the day-to-day Step Aside and ACE and all the rubbish, that the schmutz and the the kind of corruption, and you get twirled into your head goes into a knot. But you got to step out, and for me that's stepping out, and the key thing is to walk amongst the people of this country. And I've had as you mentioned, I'm doing a little piece of work on some clothing that Nando's is developing together with a young gene maker called Tsepo the Gene Maker, who's an incredible guy, incredible talent, incredible humble guy, a guy that has was brought up by 3 powerful women in his life. Unfortunately, he never knew his father, and so many stories in South Africa where I've had the privilege of having a father, a strong father, and a privilege of a supportive and a mentoring father. And a guy like Tsepo hasn't had anyone near him. So for me to play a role, and for my son Jonty to play a role with Tsepo is a privilege to play that kind of father mentorship role. And so the work that we've been doing with him led me to working with two young marketing executives. They're two little hustlers that have just been remarkable. I promise you, I haven't seen work this good. And they've referenced from a car guard that works at Spa in one of the southern suburbs of Joburg, to the Louis Vuitton catwalk in Paris, going through Washington. They've referenced work that has relevance from those two kind of broad categories, and they've connected the dots. And these are two young black guys that are just absolutely phenomenal. It gives me such hope that there is such talent in this country, that if you can nurture talent, it's one of the most important things that I think we have a responsibility. As you know, I'm north of 60 these days, and so you've got to play a role where you give back, and not just handing out cash, but trying to guide and the mistakes that I made, try and teach those mistakes to young entrepreneurs, but one-on-one, not necessarily in big forums. I've tried to stop talking in big forums because I find it takes a lot of energy and time. And, when you talk to 500 people, you can talk for an hour and people say, well, what did you say? And I'll give you one thing. And it's like you've wasted quite a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. Whereas if you work with one or two people, those one
chicken at a time,
50 lives, and then 100 lives, and 1,000 lives. It's incredible. And the joy you get from it. And not everyone that you work with is, it takes time to find the right click for both sides. And so to me, the fact that, I've seen those values very much in South Africa. For me, the government has messed up state-owned enterprises beyond belief. It's actually frightening how badly they've messed them up. But it's not only, corruption isn't only state-owned enterprises. Corruption has also been in private businesses, private enterprises. So you can't only blame government for corruption, or for like that piercing of the values. But for me, where I see the opportunity, and again, if you step back, the opportunity is because it's so messed, that government is ultimately going to find that it's going to have to work with public-private partnerships or social impact financing. We've seen it with the Solidarity Fund, where government needed to reach out. You're going to see it with the work that Adrian is doing with Discovery and the vaccines. It's phenomenal. Adrian is at the front and center of changing people's lives like you cannot imagine. Where in the world do you get the privilege of being able to work with government? And yes, it must be incredibly frustrating. I can imagine the hours that Adrian has spent, because there's mistrust, and there's also, but ultimately you get that feeling of, when you connect that feeling of trust, which we saw in the Solidarity Fund, where people come together and do incredible work, and you do it with government, with civil society, you can make an incredible impact. And I think that's going to be the model for South Africa. So you need patience, you need resilience. You can't expect that, overnight, this is all going to turn and it's going to pop out, and we're going to, and yes, it has been too long. And yes, Cyril is deliberate, and yes, Cyril's taking his time. And a lot of people are saying that he should have responded earlier. I trust him. I believe in him. I'm frustrated by him tremendously. But I work very closely in Constitution Hill and work closely with Judge Albiax, who has had his arm blown off in Maputo by the apartheid government. And when you see Albi's approach to forgiveness, which is in a gentle way, forgiving, and you think to yourself, actually, we as white South Africans, have we really, what have we paid for the past? We have to, in a way, give back, and we have to. There is a sense that we are so lucky to be living in this country, and so lucky it's so lucky that the Constitution was negotiated the way that it was, and that there was a negotiated settlement. I'm telling you now. It's really, I feel very strongly about that, and I think that we have to give back, and it's a privilege to be able to give back by mentoring and helping. It's the flame that you always talk about, Rob. You talk about be kind, and you've taught me from every shiur that I've ever had with you that when you light a flame, when somebody takes a candle and lights that takes the flame from your candle, it's not diminishing your candle at all. And we need to get that model where you take that flame and you light the flame, that everyone's gaining. And we have to, I keep saying it, it's like it's catching a game. Everybody, instead of sitting back and moaning, it's time now to actually step forward and do small things. And you're seeing it in the average South African is what I'm saying. You're not seeing it in politicians or in some of the big businesses, but you're seeing it in the average South African. We saw it in the pandemic, how incredible the people came together to feed communities, NGOs. How many NGOs are there? People thought South Africa was going to collapse. Forget about it. There are so many NGOs doing incredible work that is so deep, and in the most rural of communities, people have given up their lives to go live in really tough environment, but they are impacting society, and it's a privilege. And there's a moment in time. I tease my kids as well, and I say, when you look back and your kids say to you, what did you do in the pandemic? You don't want. It's like what George Patton said. I don't want to swear, but it's what George Patton said. You don't want to be saying that you did nothing. You want to be able to say you did stuff, and we're seeing, and that's what you're learning from Puke.
The men of the Great Assembly, they made a difference. They got back. They didn't criticize. They rolled up their sleeves. So you share with us. We're running out of time, but you share with us, because that's to me what it is, making a difference, whether it be one chicken at a time, one life at a time, or whatever it might be. You give us some advice of what you think people should be doing to make a difference to bring Mashiach.
I mean, I think the way we've looked at it is that you've got to do it with shared common value. You've got to do it in a way that somehow there's a sustainable part to the giving, because running out and just giving money to a beggar, or running out and say feeding a sandwich makes you feel good, but does it ultimately change that person's life other than that moment? Which is, and then I'm not criticizing that when you feed somebody, that it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. But if you want to really make a sustainable kind of difference, is to think about it a little bit and think, what can you do in getting involved with an NGO, or getting involved with don't necessarily have to start your own thing. It's getting involved with what the Chev did over this pandemic was absolutely incredible. Getting involved with an organization like the Chev, where you put your hand up and say, I want to get involved because it feels like the right thing for you, because you're inclined to do that particular thing in a really good way, where you can leave behind a model where people can learn how to fish. And that's what we've tried to do at Nando's. All the programs that we've done, for example, our art program, our chilies program, where we work with farmers to help farmers grow a better chili. They're growing a better chili because it's making our peri-peri taste better, because the growing of the chili is helping our sauce taste better. Now, are we doing it because we're helping the farmer? Are we doing it because it's helping our chili taste better? It's for both. It's an equal. You've got shared common values. So you have to maintain the program, because it's not, if we stop helping farmers, our chilies aren't going to be as strong, as delicious, as cared for as they would be if on the programs that we've got. And so you need to examine your own life and say, well, what really turns me on? What am I going to get excited about helping and getting involved in a project where it doesn't feel like you're doing it. If it feels like you're doing it, it's probably not right. You know what I mean? It's got to be a seamless thing, and it's not an easy one. You've got to take time, be a little bit deliberate, but there are a lot of programs and a lot of organizations that are doing incredible work, and aligning with them is the first step, I think, to making your own difference. It was Churchill who said, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. Okay, and that's been like a big thing for me, and another thing, which is also I think comes from one of the Mishnas, is if not me, then who, and if not now, when. Okay?
Hello, you remember it? Good, not bad. It's one of those things that you really have to, you've got to put your hand up. And rather than even just stop talking negative, because it's so easy to get into a spiral of negativity. But when you start doing,
You know, there's an interesting thing that I picked up from Rabbi Sachs, and I've just made a quick note of it. But it's hope is optimism plus action. Okay, and it's that action that is such an important thing, because often you sit back and you're moaning and groaning. And I found that in my own time, you know, you sit when you get into that negativity, but when you start doing stuff, you know, it's amazing. And you're a master at that, Rolf. I mean, you've been an inspiration to so many people by Caravel, change the world, do stuff, get up, you know, that action gets you out of the malaise and gets you doing and gets you going. And it's don't think, I mean, if I had to sit back, and the question you asked me, you know, it's 33 years of Nando's, 1,200 restaurants. The passport officer at Heathrow Airport has a smile on his face when he comes. Did I think we would ever do that from day one? Not a chance. Okay, not a chance. Okay, it was, I promise you, Rolf, there by the grace of God, we could have been mechula. You know, it was step by step. It was deliberate. It was, you know, people along the journey, having a strong family. It was boring stuff. It was action. There were so many elements, but it was one step at a time. But it was doing. One thing we had was doing. We got up and we did, and we inspired, and we were optimistic. And even through the time when, before Mandela was released, I mean, when South Africa was at its gloomiest, it was terrible. I mean, everybody was emigrating. It was like people said, "You're mad. You should never start a business in this time." We started Nando's at the worst possible time, and you just kept one step ahead. And then suddenly you look back, and we're in 1,200 restaurants. You know what I mean? And you can't do it for the 1,200 restaurants or whatever the numbers are. You know, you do it because of the guy in Brixton, and that we've changed his life. You know, a guy in Brixton, a guy in Washington, D.C., that when I go and visit there, you know, the guys just say, "Hey, Robbie, man, you know, you guys from Africa, you've changed my life." And here we are, an African brand that changed lives in Washington, you know, with no rocket science. Trust me, zero rocket science. It's done through humility. It's done with African values. It's done because we're from South Africa. It's done because we don't think we know everything. We're learning every day. Every day is a fresh experience. You know, we realize one of the biggest things, and I think, I know we're running out of time, Rolf, but from a South African perspective, and the bruch of South Africa as well, is the difference between Sawubona and Sanbonani and how you're doing. You know, when you go to America and people say, "How you doing?" Okay, they don't really expect an answer. So if you try it in America, when you visit America, people say, "How you doing?" And you say, "Today I'm not doing well. I'm feeling a bit sick." You know, they don't want to know. They move on. In South Africa, if somebody says, how's it? How are you doing? And you say, "I'm not feeling well," they actually will care. They'll ask, "Oh, maybe you should sit down. Maybe, you know, have some water." And it's a beautiful saying, is Sawubona and Sanbonani. Sawubona means I see you. We say that in South Africa, Sawubona, I see you, which means I see you. But Sanbonani is more powerful. It says, I see you, but I also see your ancestors. So it means that you're not traveling alone. You're actually here. You're representing you, but you're also representing your ancestors. And so you have a responsibility with that. And I think that as South Africans, that's deeply entrenched in us. We feel that. To me, I certainly feel that. And I think what I love about our constitution is that united in diversity. And sometimes we've got to realize that if you follow the preamble, you know, and you follow the constitution, we belong in this country. We are here. We've got our rightful. We've got a place in to build, but we have responsibilities to do stuff. We have responsibilities not just to sit and moan or to look at, are we going to immigrate? It's responsibilities to do small things that make a massive difference. And to me, that's a critical kind of lesson from Peter Alberts, that, you know, don't think that you can suddenly one day have 1,200 restaurants. It doesn't happen. It's brick by brick, and it's not glamorous always. I mean, there are glamorous moments, and there are moments of deep joy and deep kind of, but those moments are reflective. You know, it's time where you actually sit and think. And I always find in those moments, I had a privilege of meeting Dr. Anton Rupert, the old man Rupert, and he told me, he said to me, "Young man, you know, it's better to be at the bottom of the mountain looking up than on the top of the mountain looking down." And I've never forgot those words, because, you know, and that to me is that humility, because you have to realize, as much as you think you've achieved, somebody's done more than you, and also keep thinking that you got higher to go and push harder, do more. And you've learned that from the Rebbe.
You've traveled the world, and you've traveled the world, and you've seen Chabad all over the world. That was the Rebbe. The Rebbe was just one human being at a time, wherever you can make a difference.
Where you taught me that with divine providence. The biggest lessons, the people that I've dealt with, that I've met by complete coincidence, because my plane was late. And then you meet a guy, and then you suddenly realize that 10 years later, hey, this is where we met. Do you realize that I met you at the airport in Turkey because our plane was 2 hours delayed? And look what's happened from that 2 hours. Now you've got two choices, Rov, and you taught me this properly, that in that 2 hours you can sit and sulk and moan and groan and wonder why that, why you, or you can look around and say, there's got to be some reason that I'm here for this particular moment, and explore that. And it's beautiful, those are the moments that I think have affected my life more than the predicted moments. This kind of, because the unintended consequences of sometimes over planning, you don't think of that stuff. You can plan as much as you want, but that unintended consequences sometimes comes and claps you. You didn't think of that. People that I've helped the most are the ones that have hurt me the most. And it's again, if you help with, I think there's an expectation, you get hurt properly. And I think that there's certain very clear lessons that, again, if you dig into Pirkei Avos and you take that as a manual for life. And the crazy part is, again, just thinking that it was written like 1900 years ago, or 1800 years ago, how relevant can it be to this day? I mean, you think it can't be relevant. It's so alive. I mean, but you need to be guided properly. And I know you've got a new book coming out as well. I'm going to give you a punt as well, Rolf, that you're launching a new book and a new Pirkei Avos edition. And I mean, it's hard to find a good rabbi that can teach it for you, or take an easy book to understand.
It's not you doing it.
Digging into it is a bracha.
So I just want to listen.
The privilege of you, Rov, and then
on the changing the world. If you look at the Rebbe, what he said, increased acts of goodness and kindness, just one simple act of goodness and kindness. Forget about the concept, can bring about the revelation of Mashiach, where godliness will be revealed. We have to go with that. Now we're running out of time, and the last line of the Mishna is "V'osasai l'Torah," make a fence around the Torah, which simply means have disciplines. I just like your closing remarks on that, but it also means that two people speaking have to put a fence around their drosha. They've got to know when to stop as well. So we can end with that. So I'm going to ask you just your closing remarks on disciplines, on not having everything you want when you want it, and if it's available, not necessarily do you need it. Your closing remarks.
I think it's critical to have those disciplines, Rolf. And I think that I certainly never had those disciplines in our business in the early days. And in a way, I think I was never a process individual. So I never enjoyed process, and I never enjoyed the disciplines of that process. And as I've got older, I've realized that process is an important part of a business. You need to have those guidelines and the processes. It's very, very critical. And I think that you often what we say at Nando's is what you say no to is sometimes more relevant than what you say yes to. It's understanding what you're going to turn down, what you're not going to eat is as important as sometimes what you are going to eat. And so you need to know what's right from wrong. You need to know what's good or bad. You need to have that kind of core values and those disciplines built around your fence. You can't just, you can't be a glutton and just eat as much as you want and then expect to be satisfied. It's not necessary that the more you eat, the more satisfied you're going to be. In fact, the more you eat, the less satisfied you might be, because it's what you eat that's important. That's really the critical part. And I'm not talking about, I'm not punting kosher here, but I'm saying it's an important element that sometimes just filling your mouth with stuff because you can afford it, or you can have it, or you can. That's not, and it doesn't bring happiness. I mean, I've seen it so many times. So having those disciplines, having that kind of restraint, is a very, very good thing. It can be frustrating, and in business, it's certainly frustrating because you feel like you want to, we certainly as young entrepreneurs felt that we were going to tackle the world, and I got such a lesson. I mean, the kind of stepping back, but we were when I was operating, we were in 32 countries, and we're down now to 23. So we've closed 9 countries. Just think about that. We're retracting from 9 countries, and we're doing better now than we've ever done before. So, not necessarily more is, again, more assets, the more worries. You don't necessarily need more assets. You can do better with less. So it's those are the kind of core lessons that I've learned, yeah,
Sure.
I hope in a way it's come
Thank you
through.
very much for making the time. And you are a born teacher and an inspiration to everyone. And thank you. Please, God, we should have, through our learning of Torah, we should have the revelation of Mashiach immediately.
Amen.
Thank
Amen.
you.
Thank you for everything you've taught me and for all the years and your patience.
Be good.
Thank you, Rav. Thank you.